Support for 10,000 Things comes from Third Place Books. With 3 store locations in Seattle, Washington, Third Place Books offers a wide selection of books, gifts, and over 250 author readings a year, in-store or online at thirdplacebooks.com.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, the host of Fresh Air. We bring you in-depth, long-form interviews with actors, directors, musicians, authors, journalists, and more. Listen to our Peabody Award-winning Fresh Air podcast from WHYY and NPR.
When people think about innovations in kitchen appliances, the Instapot might come to mind first. But there's another kind of technology that's been around since the 1960s that's best known for its simplicity. The Tatung steamer consists of a small removable pot nested inside a bigger pot that's fixed in place. You pour water into the outer pot, which steams whatever you're cooking. And you can also add water into the interior pot, which boils or braises your ingredients. The appliance is most often used to steam rice. But if you place a metal basket into the interior pot just above your cooking rice, you can also steam vegetables or other foods at the same time. The Tatung steamer is a machine in which everyday people can make things as simple as steamed buns, soups, and bamboo-wrapped rice dumplings. It's perfect for a college dorm room, which is precisely why my Taiwanese immigrant parents broke the rules and kept a Tatung steamer in their dorm room in Kirksville, Missouri in the early 1970s. It wasn't the forbidden hot plate, and it was a reminder of the place where they came from. In my parents' household, the Tatung was a workhorse that put out rice every day for our family of 4. And at New Year's, my dad would fit a whole fish into the Tatung, which he'd gently steam for the main dish. When I lived and worked in rural Arkansas, my culinary options were limited. I missed Taiwanese food and went shopping on eBay in a fit of nostalgia and bought myself an antique Tatung steamer in pea soup green. I cooked rice and steamed fish fillets, but never fully graduated to making more complex cuisines. There were no aunties to whisper cooking secrets in my ear. But make no mistake, Taiwanese cuisine is as complex as Taiwanese personhood. There's no easy shorthand for explaining Taiwanese identity or cultural history. Take Taiwanese hot pot versus Japanese shabu-shabu. Both are one-pot meals, but differ subtly in cooking technique, ingredients, and how they are served. Taiwan was actually colonized by the Japanese, as well as the Dutch, Spanish, and the Portuguese. It's a layover island for all of Asia, plus home to 16 indigenous tribal groups with their own distinct languages and cultures. All these factors bring their own flavors. Tiffany Ran is a chef and the mastermind behind Baba Liu, a pop-up restaurant and catering business in Seattle that focuses on the flavors of Taiwan.
I don't know. It's like not something I can sum up in one sentence. This is what Taiwanese food is. It really takes more storytelling, explanation.
And like Taiwanese identity, the Tatung comes with its own specific context. Part steamer, part rice cooker, and part reheating oven. The double boiler steams and warms everything from hard-boiled tea eggs and congee to chocolate lava cake. It's an appliance every Taiwanese person would recognize, and for Tiffany, her Tatung was more than a connection to her culture's cuisine. It was a thing that remained steadfast throughout the years, and provided comfort to her at a critical time in her life when she was learning who she was and who she was becoming. The thing that helped her navigate the complexities of family and career. This is 10,000 Things, a podcast about modern-day artifacts of Asian American life and the stories they reveal. I'm Shin-Yi Pai. Today, the Tatung Cooker.
Support for 10,000 Things comes from Third Place Books. With 3 store locations in Seattle, Washington, Third Place Books offers a wide selection of books, gifts, and over 250 author readings a year, in-store or online at thirdplacebooks.com.
The 1992 Los Angeles Uprising, the Cambodian genocide, Japanese American incarceration. What you know isn't always the full story. Our new podcast, Inheriting, about Asian American and Pacific Islander families where the past is personal.
Korean Americans, we call it 사이구.
Did you ever realize when you were a child that you became an orphan?
Camp was such a hard time. How do you think you got through it?
Listen to Inheriting from LAist Studios and the NPR Network, wherever you get your podcasts.
Tiffany got her first tatung at a pivotal moment. She was about to head off to college and leave home for the first time. Her Taiwanese mother took her shopping for some things she might need.
We had stopped at a grocery store just to buy some food and this Asian market, 99 Ranch. And my mom said, "Oh, you'll probably need one of these."
It was a simple purchase that many mothers before had made for their daughters. It was a special rite of passage to mark a particular moment of initiation into a larger life.
And she said, "Take this with you to college. It's really important that you have one because you're essentially living independently now for the first time. And this is what mothers give their daughters when they move out of the house."
Many new brides in Taiwan receive their first tatung as a wedding gift that they take with them into their new life and role as a wife, where they can anticipate making thousands of meals over a lifetime of caregiving. This was a parallel turning point for Tiffany, a moment of making a bridge into adulthood, going from being under the care of one's parents to becoming independent and caring for one's own self.
And that was what she gifted me.
Tiffany grew up in Southern California's Diamond Bar community. Many Asian Americans live there, so she had access to a wide range of Taiwanese American foods. Her parents separated permanently when Tiffany was 9, and her world diverged. Her mother moved away. Tiffany stayed and lived with her father in Diamond Bar, and he wasn't particularly adept in the kitchen.
It was sort of like a bachelor-style kind of breakfast and dinner situation.
At home, the tatung was used to heat up packaged processed food.
We would just buy these buns and mantou and all the frozen kind of like pastries from an Asian market, and you'd pop it in the tatung, and I would go and wash up for school. And by the time you're done washing up, you know, your like buns or whatever it was you're eating for breakfast would be warm and ready to eat.
The tatung is extremely versatile if you know how to use it and what it's best suited for, but it doesn't do everything well.
At one point, I had tried a Eggo waffle from a friend of mine, and my dad had no idea what to do with them. We didn't even own a toaster, so he stuck it in the tatung steamer the same way you would like a red bean bao or something. And it didn't turn out well at all. Like, it was not the right way to heat that thing up.
Food functioned at the level of basic sustenance with her father, and often there wasn't enough of it.
There was a lot of times of coming home and the fridge would be empty. So it was really strange because I would sometimes just go a long time feeling very hungry, and then I would go visit my mom and eat so well every day for a week. And I feel like it was kind of life-saving to have those experiences, especially when you're growing up hungry.
Those experiences with her mom allowed her to imagine a different life for herself, a life without scarcity, a life in which all of her needs could be met. Tiffany would visit or see her mom occasionally. She moved around and lived in New York, but also Shanghai and Taipei.
It was always important to her that I give every single food, every cuisine a try.
Her mother was curious about food and an adventurous eater, so with her mom, food was a special experience.
If you ask her, "What am I eating?" she'll say, "Eat it first and I'll tell you later." Sometimes you might not want to know what you're eating. There's a lot of scary things that it could be, but yeah, my mom just was insatiable in that way.
Tiffany's mom would use the tatung to make complex dishes and hearty filling soups that often had medicinal qualities.
Soup that's made from steam, there's something about it. It feels so nourishing.
Using steam to make the base of a soup is a much gentler method. You're using a foundational cooking method that wraps the food in moisture rather than applying direct heat.
It extracts the natural juices from the chicken meat itself. Whereas normally in Western kitchens, like a more aggressive boil or simmer of these bones that has to sit on the heat for a very, very long time until it kind of starts to break down all the collagen. And that's delicious, of course, but something about making soup in a steamer, it's just this really light ethereal broth that I think is completely different texture, really different feeling going down.
2 different households. Each had its own constant tatung. And while they met the same basic need, they put out completely different ideas of food.
Cooking did happen at my dad's house, but very sporadically. Yeah. And at my mom's house, with that tatung always rolling, it fills the whole kitchen with smells.
Smells, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine the Chinese herbal smells, but...
so strong.
Yeah, I also kind of love the sounds that it emits as it's kind of like burbling along and kind of rattling.
Right. It's like a weird little white noise machine for me.
By experiencing food with her mother, Tiffany saw the complexity, depth, and variety of food that people put in their bodies. And when she was apart from her mother, she felt the lack of food and flavor in her father's household. And then there was the third influence, the Food Network. She remembers watching lots of Iron Chef.
I always watched it on TV, and it felt like it just lived in that Hollywood land.
But she never ever considered cooking a real career option.
You would see people on TV, and there might be some female chefs. There might even be an Asian chef, but for some reason that never was presented to me as an option. That like, oh, do you want to do this? Because you could.
Yeah. So Tiffany went to college for journalism, and in the dorm, she learned how to sustain herself using her tatung.
There was a lot of reheating of bows, I won't lie.
She learned how to use it in a way that worked for her as a college student.
I would steam up like a sweet potato, wrap it in foil, and take it with me to class. It would be like a hand warmer as I walked to class on a cold day, and then I can eat it for breakfast.
The tatung allowed her to cook for herself as she learned more about what she liked. It gave her something easy to learn on.
It's a very not glamorous, uncomplicated machine. You place water in it, and it's an on and off switch.
This simplicity meant it was easy to experiment with.
There is really so much you can do with it. You just sort of have to play around with it.
And Tiffany experimented a lot along the way.
Just pop it into the steamer and see how it turns out.
Sometimes the result was good, sometimes it wasn't, but more often than not, it was healthy. Rice and vegetables are easy to steam in the tatung, so it can make something more nutritious than a microwave can. Tiffany's roommate learned to use the tatung as well. Rather than brave the common room's communal microwave, she would heat korma sabzi, the Persian stew, and other rice dishes from her mom. After college, Tiffany headed to law school, fueled by a sense of practicality. She'd experienced being poor as a child, and her parents had high hopes for her career. But after a year, it just wasn't working out.
I just was really so unhappy, not doing well, and I just thought, the last thing the world needs is a bad lawyer.
So Tiffany quit law school and returned to journalism. But this time she brought her love for food into her writing and began to connect the dots between her different interests. She landed an internship at the Northwest Asian Weekly and moved to Seattle. This allowed her to seek out food stories. Tiffany reached out to a chef at a new restaurant on Bainbridge Island and asked if she could observe and write about what she saw. She wanted to see what happened behind the scenes of a restaurant, but she didn't know what she didn't know.
What they don't tell you is there's no room for anyone to stand around in a busy restaurant kitchen and do nothing. I got swept up in the adrenaline of it, and I started sweeping, grabbing things for them, and it just sort of graduated from like these really little tasks to doing more advanced things.
Tiffany had a lot to learn about Western cooking. Seattle restaurant food is not what she grew up making and eating in her tatung.
I remember Googling on my phone what marjoram looks like, and it looks a lot like oregano. So I'm sitting there in the herb bin figuring out which one to grab, and feeling the sense of fear because you're so worried that people are going to see through your inexperience and just think you're a total idiot.
Working in a kitchen was tough, but it was full of novelty, flavor, and adrenaline. She enjoyed the physicality of learning a new skill. Tiffany spent more and more hours in the kitchen, and soon she had a job. She worked in other kitchens. She worked for caterers, learning more and more as she went. It took years, but Tiffany became a professional cook.
The fantasy is always like there's some inner talent comes out, and before you know it, you go from knowing nothing to cooking these beautifully plated dishes. And it wasn't that at all. Like I spent a year just cutting shallots.
During her time working in kitchens, Tiffany didn't have interest or energy to cook lavishly for herself at home, but she had her Tatung steamer.
For so many years, the Tatung almost became like a default microwave. Just turn it on, jump in the shower, and you have like a hot bowl of rice or a hot something waiting for you when you come out.
But it was more than that. It was a vital source of emotional sustenance through the tough times.
There were just days where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe this isn't the right thing for me. And like you go take a shower, you try to wash away a lot of your discouragement, your scars, and your whatever baggage that you're hanging on to. And then coming out of the shower and being able to smell food, you're smelling like really light, delicate, steamed vegetables. You're smelling sweet, freshly cooked rice.
The smell of hot food at the end of a long day made Tiffany feel cared for, and it made her think of her mom and being with her again.
I'd catch myself for a second because I would think like, oh, wait, my mom's in my kitchen. I was just so tired during those times that I would forget that I had put something in there, and I come out of the shower and it's that kind of split second of wishful thinking.
Yeah, that smell of home.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of primal and deep.
Right. Yeah. And even living in Taiwan and visiting my mom, I would remember waking up to those smells sometimes. I didn't really think about it, but in a weird like robot way, it's almost like the Tatung is my weird like robot mom, you know?
Surrogate mom.
Yeah, surrogate mother.
I remember those smells and textures as well as a little kid, or also like going home during college. The first thing that I would hear in the morning when I was waking up would be my mom scooping out the rice, and then the sound of the rice grains hitting the metal of the inner rice bowl for the Tatung rice cooker.
Yeah.
Tiffany did advance in her cooking skills, and she started to dig deeper into Taiwanese cooking. She researched, she traveled, she made trips to Taiwan to visit her mother. And Tiffany recognized that Seattle didn't have many Taiwanese restaurants. She began to daydream about sharing the flavors of home with her community. But Tiffany couldn't make any big plans for her future. Her dad got sick. He was never formally diagnosed because he refused to go to the doctor. Her dad's condition would take a turn, and Tiffany would have to drop her work and life in Seattle to travel home to California to take care of him.
His appetite was just very up and down. Sometimes he would just have an insatiable craving for something, and other times he wouldn't want to eat any food at all.
Food became a point of stress, but Tiffany had to make sure he'd eat and take in enough calories. She carved out 2 parallel lives between Seattle and Los Angeles. In Seattle, she was working in restaurants or catering, staying out late and driving home after stressful shifts with her coworkers and eating quick meals. Then, Tiffany would leave it all to fly back to California. She'd put her dreams on hold as her dad convalesced in his quiet, dark, sad home, where her entire life revolved around his medication schedules and making sure he was eating. Tiffany made these trips and cared for him for nearly 10 years. These 2 worlds were so different, and she kept them pretty separate. Seattle clothes stayed in Seattle. Dad's caretaking clothes stayed in LA. She would pack pretty light when she traveled.
But the one thing I did bring with me was that Tatung cooker.
Tiffany made her dad super rice or even small steamed cakes.
Very soft food, low salt food, or sometimes I'm just not even really cooking at all because all he's willing to eat is like a milkshake or something.
Meanwhile, Tiffany's dream of bringing Taiwanese food to Seattle languished.
I held on to this idea for years, just feeling this sense of like, I'm not ready. And also, my dad could get sick at any time, and then I'd have to drop what I'm doing and then fly home and abandon all hope of getting this thing off the ground.
After 10 years of illness, Tiffany's dad passed away. It was a moment of deep sadness, but also one of relief. His suffering was over, and Tiffany had fulfilled her responsibility. She had done all that she could.
There are moments where I look at that little individual small-sized Tatung and it's still trucking along. It's been with me to college, went with me to law school, back and forth from California to Washington. It's been with me through every stage of my life. You don't always have people who are going to be there for you constantly, and you don't even have things that are going to be there for you constantly. Like, most things are so disposable, and here's this just little appliance that's always been there. In some weird way, it's like also has made me feel really cared for at times.
After her dad passed away, Tiffany directed her energies toward taking care of herself. She reconnected with her dreams. Tiffany launched her Taiwanese food pop-up, Baba Liu, in 2018 in order to learn and share the stories of Taiwanese cooking, which is ever-changing and evolving. And her pop-up gave her a way to combine her love of cooking with her love of storytelling. At a pop-up dinner hosted by Tiffany last spring, I had my first experience of sampling Taiwanese rustic noodles that were torn by hand rather than evenly cut. Their chewy texture combined beautifully within a clear seafood broth which brought delight and comfort. Now Tiffany uses an industrial-sized tatung for cooking in large quantities at her pop-ups, but she still keeps her old silver-colored tatung at home on her kitchen countertop.
It's easy for people to overlook it and favor the fancier, flashier appliances that appear as if it can do more.
Without the family oral traditions of how to use it, it's easy to miss the amazing culinary prowess of the humble tatung steamer.
It really is similar to Taiwanese identity. We are very complex, we are very powerful, but it's really easy for other people as well as ourselves to discount us or assume that we don't have as much to offer. We might not be as flashy or as cool as maybe some other Asian cultures were maybe not as well represented, but we are reliable and we are workhorses and we can do a hell of a lot.
There are times when no matter how much we long for it, there's no one around to mother us. But there is a tried and tested kitchen aid that can get us through. The tatung may never be about the fancy features, but it's there to make the simplest of fare, to turn out warm and comforting dishes while offering something greater than food. It's there to give ease and to connect us back to our earliest memories of home. Next week's object is ube cheesecake. 10,000 Things is produced by KUOW in Seattle, a member of the NPR network. Our host, writer, and creator is me, Xinyi Pai. Whitney Henry Lester produced this episode. Jim Gates is our editor. The show art is designed by Eason Yang. Original music is by Tomo Nakayama. Our production team includes Michaela Giannotti-Boyle, Hans Twite, Amelia Peacock, Brendan Sweeney, and Marshall Eisen. If you like this podcast, KUOW has a lot more great audio for you. Search KUOW in your podcast app and see what piques your interest. KUOW podcasts are made possible through community funding. You can support 10,000 Things and other KUOW podcasts by making a donation of any size at KUOW.org. There's a link in the show notes. And as always, thanks for listening.
Hey, my name's Claire McGrain, and I'm a producer for Seattle Now, KUOW's local news podcast. There is a lot happening in our region, and it's a lot of work to keep track of it all. We'll get you caught up on the latest news and take a deep dive into something happening around the city, all in under 15 minutes. Get a morning walk in or grab a cup of coffee and start your day with us. Learn something new and connect with our city by searching for Seattle Now wherever you get your podcasts.